With the introduction of Melody, we might see a second wave of keywords for Vanguard. But let's take a look back and see at some failed attempts of Bushiroad of making some keywords.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, today I want to talk about keywords and to be more precise about some failed attempts of Bushiroad of making said keywords. And this video was mainly inspired by the whole addition of the Melody keyword that they introduced for the new support of Bermuda Triangle. And it made me think about the possibility of some future keywords for all the other different clans, and that in turn made me think about the older keywords that were introduced in the G era. And that in turn would make me think about bad keywords that also were introduced in that era. And then I came to the conclusion of 3 specific keywords that probably are on the list of the worst keywords of that era on most people's personal list. Or at least one of them is. And these 3 keywords I'm referring to are Unite, Ritual, and of course, Brave. Usually when Bushiroad introduced a new keyword for a clan, that either meant that they get a new kind of playstyle addition to their previous playstyle, or they streamlined a certain aspect of their playstyle to a whole new level. A good example of this is the blaze mechanic for Kagero. Every other clan could retire and it made Kagero a little bit ununique in terms of what they could do. But thanks to the blaze mechanic, they had a more incentive to retiring, or that your opponent was forced to call more cards, otherwise they will get beneficial effect from it. Same can be said about Hollow for Grand Blue, as that made a more decision aspect to your resurrection of units, as you can now also put them in Hollow to get more benefits from them and then go back to the drop zone and you could call them once again. Or in the case of Narukami, with the whole binding aspect and the Thunderstrike, they got a whole new game plan, a whole new strategy and a whole new archetype, which they could not only destroy units with just retiring, but they could also bind stuff from the drop zone and get more beneficial effects from it. Same as with Timely for Gear Chronicle, as that was a whole new playstyle for them, as they usually would only rewind stuff. But in the case of Unite, Ritual and Brave, this wasn't necessarily the case. And I will go in more detail with each and every keyword, as well as what I personally would have done to improve on the keyword before its initial conception, how Bushiroad could improve on it. So first one I want to talk about is Unite. This is a very basic keyword, as the condition for it is very simple. The player just need to call 2 cards either to the Guardian Circle or to the Rearguard Circle in one single turn. And with that, that's basically everything for the keyword. This was a condition keyword that basically stated you need to meet the requirement and then the skill would be live. As you might notice, that's a very easy skill to fulfill. It's just calling 2 Rearguards. And most of you that are already familiar with Gold Paladin knows that it is very superior call heavy, as they can call a lot of cards from the top of their deck and to fill out the field. So having 2 cards called in one turn isn't really that difficult, especially with the second Gurgit that was included in GPT-10 that could basically call 2 cards when you stride on top of it with any kind of stride. With that, you had Unite active every single turn. But because the skill was very easy to fulfill, also made Bushiroad aware of it, and they decided to give any card that has a Unite skill a very minor or weak effect. And we can see it in mostly all of their cards that when they have the Unite keyword attached to a skill, it was probably just some generic power gain from a couple of Ks and nothing really more. There were some exceptions with their strides with Glorious Rain Dragon and the latest Grade 1, but these exceptions were far and few in between. And also they didn't bring anything new to Gold Paladin. They were already focused about superior calling units from the top of their deck and just filling out the field with it and gaining more aggressive plays and attacking units through that way, and also chaining more multi-attacks. And this Unite didn't really add more about it. This was just a new way to gain extra power to most of your units, and it didn't bring new aspect to Gold Paladin. And that, in my sense, makes it a bad keyword, as it didn't do anything for the clan. It was just a hindrance to some card design, as they could not make powerful skills with Unite, as Unite was too easy to fulfill. And if that was the only condition, then you had some free power crept cards. However, what they could have done to improve on the gold paladin keyword aspect is to just entirely change it up. They can ditch the name Unite and make it into something like Reinforce, as in reinforcing your troops, as that's what gold paladin is all about. Putting exhausted units back to the deck, or not useful units back to the deck, and getting new units out of them, and with more either to fill out your ranks for better formation, or just keep attacking and hammering your opponent down. So Reinforce would be a quite good name with it, and they could add a number to it, as that number would state the amount of superior called units. So the idea about this keyword is that a skill would have a condition with Reinforce and a number, and you needed to superior call from deck that amount of units to fulfill that condition. This way, you really are talking about the superior calling aspect of the clan, so you need to chain a lot of cards into another card, and for gold paladin that's not really that hard to accomplish, as you have a lot of cards in superior call, but at the same time, you can make stronger effects and more balanced out effects coupled with the amount of superior calling cards. So if you want to have a very strong effect, you can put that behind a Reinforce 4 or Reinforce 5, as that means that you superior called a lot of cards from deck to fulfill that. And the superior calling units will cost some resources, so in tense you will waste resources to get to that point in game, and then you also need to waste more resources to activate the skill if you need to use some counterblast or soul blast or whatsoever to activate the skills. And with that, you can make more diverse skills, as not everything with that keyword is fulfilled with just calling 2 cards. You can make a Reinforce 1, a Reinforce 3, a Reinforce 5, a Reinforce 7. You maybe can even make cards with the ability that it will count as calling 2 or 3 cards at the same time, so you can accelerate your Reinforce cards, and you will have a more dynamic gameplay for gold paladin, as you have more incentive to call more units and you will get more benefit from them. And same with Ritual Cross, you can also make a Reinforce Cross that a unit gets this amount of power for every superior called unit, and we have already seen those cards in a Unite form as Horsa. That could have been a Reinforce Cross card, as you get more benefit from calling units out of it. The second keyword I want to talk about is Brave, and this is probably on most people's list of terrible key cards or just terrible mechanic in general, as it really didn't make any sense in the fact that you have a card game that's all about attacking and defending with the same cards from hand. So why did you make a keyword that states that you need to have 3 cards or less in hand to activate these skills? You're just making a flawed keyword in basic sense of the game, as you probably want to have more cards in hand to defend against your opponent's attack, as with 3 cards you cannot do much. And especially in the time that they introduced this keyword, multi-attacking was rampant, and it was only becoming worse from that point onward. So having 3 cards in hand during your opponent's turn was just asking to die, especially against a card like Rinne. That's just giving them a free win. And that was the biggest gripe with Brave for most Royal Paladin players, and just basically anybody that was like, why did they make up Brave in the way that it did? It didn't make any sense for Royal Paladin. Royal Paladin was all about superior calling to the field, making a full field, and just powering up the units through that means, and not by having a low hand size. That was never introduced before, so why did they make that specific keyword for Royal Paladin? And granted, a lot of cards were very strong with the keyword Brave, that you could make some very scary pseudo infinite loop attacks and just hammer down on your opponent. But the only problem was that if they survived your initial onslaught, or they could counter it, you probably would die the next turn, as you have only 2-3 cards left to defend with. Also, another issue with it was that you could never attack with your Vanguard first, as with triple drive meant that you will have 4 cards or more in your hand if you attacked with your Vanguard and you had 1 card in hand. So you probably needed to attack with your Rearguard first to activate all their Brave skills, and then lastly you could attack with your Vanguard, otherwise you could not fulfill those conditions. And that was also a little bit of an issue with the things that the clan functions as a whole. In my personal opinion, how they could improve on the keyword for Royal Paladin was just flat out drop the whole Brave thing. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for any kind of clan in Vanguard. Just drop it. They should have gone back to the roots, to what Royal Paladin was all about, filling the field and powering up units that way. What I could have done is take Unite, the word Unite. So that was the reason why I didn't want to call the new Gold Paladin keyword Unite, is give Unite to Royal Paladin, but change that effect. Make it that Unite stands for how much your field is filled. So Unite 3 can mean have 3 units on the field. Unite 4 means 4 units. Unite 5 or maximum of Unite 6 means 6 units. You can also maybe count it to rear guard, so you always have a Vanguard. So maybe Unite can go from 1 to 5, and that means how many rear guards you have. This makes sense, as that's how old school Alfred worked, as for every rear guard it gains 2k. That's how this new Unite can work. It can also mean that some skills can activate only if you have 3 rear guards on the field. Or maybe that they only can activate if you have 1 rear guard. You can make it that Unite is about a specific number, so you need to have exactly that. Or you can make Unite to be Unite and above, or Unite and below. You can make all these kinds of interaction that you need to build a certain field to activate certain specific skills. As Royal Paladin is all about building a specific powerful field and power up your unit together. They could have gone this route and it would make much more sense for Royal Paladin, and they could also make much more dynamic skills, as in this case with Brave, they need to make Brave skills very powerful, or they need to make some very powerful supporting cards that can allow you to either, with the starter Electos, that you have Brave active no matter how many cards in hand, or ways to ditch your hand for a temporary moment in the game and then get it back when you need it the most. And there wasn't a lot of support for that. With this whole new Unite thing for Royal Paladin, you won't have that problem. You can make all kinds of different skills depending on what kind of conditions they need to fulfill. The last keyword that I want to touch about is Ritual, and basically Shadow Paladin in general, with the whole how they worked during the G era. Shadow Paladin, everybody that's now playing Standard knows what their main focus is. It's about retiring or sacrificing your own units to empower your other units or your Vanguard in most cases. And this was the case for G in some form, but in G it slowly went towards a more grade 1 focus, where they could superior call and work with grade 1s, where Royal Paladin did grade 2s. And because they went that route, it almost felt that Shadow Paladin was basically a palette swap from Royal Paladin, or Royal Paladin was a palette swap of Shadow Paladin. But the only difference is Shadow Paladin didn't have a keyword at the beginning, and Royal Paladin had Brave. So by definition, Shadow Paladin was better. But then they introduced Ritual, and they really went up with the grade 1 game, as Ritual basically meant you need to have this amount of grade 1s in your drop zone. So Ritual 3 was 3 grade 1s, or Ritual 5 was 5 grade 1s. And that's fine in the sense that it works somewhat with your retiring skills, but it was mainly focused around the grade 1 aspect, as superior calling grade 1s to the field and then sacrificing them would accelerate your grade 1 to the drop zone. So in that sense, it made sense, but it didn't feel really like Shadow Paladin, as it wasn't about actually retiring stuff. It was just having cards in your drop zone, and that's more something towards Grand Blue in a sense. But what also bothers me about the Ritual is that it's actually pretty damn capped, as you have only so much grade 1s that you can run in the game. And they made some grade 2s that also count as grade 1s, but it's still limited, but also at the same time too easy to fulfill, as Ritual 3, as most cards are, is so easy to fulfill to get. You can basically have it at your first stride turn, and with that said, you're basically set and done for the game. You didn't have to do it much more, and for the Ritual 5 or 7 cards, or Ritual Cross, that is at the end, that didn't really make an impact, you basically had to wait 1 turn, or maybe accelerate with some cards, and you were done for the game. That is also another issue that I have with that keyword. There is no interaction with your opponent. When you have your Ritual active, your opponent can do nothing about it. They just need to accept the fact that you're at full power for the rest of the game, and they are done, and you need to deal with it. Sure, there were some clans that could annoy them with it, like Narukami, as they could bind stuff, but that was very minor, and it depends on how the game went, if you could do something about it or not. What I personally would have done for Shadow Paladin with their keyword is to go back to their roots and really focus about retiring units. And they can keep the ritual name. It still fits with their whole retiring stuff. But instead that ritual number meant the amount of grade 1s in your drop zone, the ritual number could meant the amount of grades that you retired for a skill. So you could make ritual 5, and that means you need to retire 5 grades for that skill. So a grade 3 and a grade 2, or 2 grade 2s and a grade 1. You can then make a ritual 1, a ritual 3, a ritual 5, a ritual 4, and all these kinds of crazy numbers to make more interesting and more powerful skills, and at the same time have more playability and more game design that went towards the whole mechanic or the whole focus what Shadow Paladin originally was about. Also with this, they can make more ritual cross-like cards that basically state you can retire any kind of any number of rear guards, and the skill would gain more benefit in the amount of grades that you retire. So for every 3 grades you will get more power, for example, or maybe for a specific amount of grades you get set skill, and then for a second amount of grades you get second skill, just like how the grade 4s work for Gear Chronicle now. Maybe they could incorporate something like that. They can even make cards or units that work by discarding extra units from hand to add even more grades to their potential ritual number. And there are a lot of other ways that they could expand on this idea, and it's the same for the other 2 keywords, for the new Royal Paladin Unite and for the Reinforce for Gold Paladin. And as you have seen with my examples, is that the issue that I have with the previous keywords is that they aren't really open to game design or multiple ways to get a card design, or just flat out broken or not working within the aspect of Vanguard like Brave. United Ritual didn't have that initial problem, but they were really restricted in their game design, and Unite a lot more, as it's such a generic thing, as Ritual is a lot better, and they made it even better with the Ritual Cross, but it didn't really expand it on it because of how late it was introduced into the game. But let me know what you guys think of the already existing keywords in Vanguard, how you might want to improve on certain things, what are your favorites, which one you don't like. So let me know in the comments down below all those things, and let's this discussion going. And who knows, maybe we'll come back to this subject if you guys want me to talk about keywords more in depth, or to do a specific video, maybe a top 10 and top 5 or something like that. This was just a generic discussion about 3 specific keywords and how I feel about them and how I personally would have implemented them into the game. Very interesting that my 3 top picks of less desirable keywords are all 3 of the Paladin clans. Maybe that said something about these clans for me personally, but who knows. But that's all for today. I'm Mr. Time Leap, and see you guys in the next one.